You ever have a morning so absurd, so out of bounds, you're still shaking your head about it years later? Because let me tell you, nothing in my Navy SEAL training prepared me for the day the HOA president, Margaret Whitmore, busted through my door with Child Protective Services at 6 a.m., determined to take my newborn daughter, all because she thought my family wasn't traditional enough. Yeah, that happened. 3 days home from the hospital with my wife, Sarah, and our baby girl, Grace. I was still running on adrenaline, barely sleeping, watching over my 2 girls, when suddenly the whole house rattled with this pounding way too aggressive for any neighborly drop-in. "Open this door right now." That voice, shrill as a fire alarm. I looked through the peephole, and there's Margaret in her full Iron Lady regalia, gray hair pulled so tight it looked painful, 2 HOA board members flanking her, and a nervous-looking guy in a wrinkled suit with a clipboard. I cracked the door just enough to see what fresh hell was coming, and before I could even get a word out, Margaret just barreled through like she owned the place, her little entourage marching in right behind. Sarah, still healing from her C-section, was struggling to sit up in bed, eyes wild with confusion. "David, what's all that noise?" "Is Grace okay?" I told her to stay in bed, that I'd handle it. I was used to handling high-pressure situations, but this was personal. I turned to Margaret, who was standing in my living room like she was the Queen of England, and asked what on earth she was doing. She didn't blink. "We're here to collect the baby," she said, cool as ice. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard. "Excuse me." She pointed at Grace's bassinet. "According to HOA regulations, unmarried residents can't have children on the property. Since your wife isn't legally married to you, the child has to be removed." Now, I know my voice was cold because my blood felt like it had frozen over. "We've been married 3 years," I told her, but she just whipped out a folder. "Sarah Collins isn't legally married to David Martinez," she declared like she was reading out a sentence in court. "Different last names indicate an unmarried situation, which violates our family standards. Sarah kept her maiden name," I explained, because she wanted to honor her late father. That didn't matter to Margaret. "Prove it," she snapped. "Show me a marriage certificate." I told her I wasn't obligated to prove anything to her, and that's when the suit with the clipboard stepped forward, Harold Klein from Child Protective Services. "We've received complaints about an unwed mother in an unstable living situation," he said, not even making eye contact. Margaret smirked like she'd just won the lottery. "Children need stable traditional families, not whatever this is." Sarah, pale and shaking, appeared in the doorway, cradling Grace. Harold told her to go back to bed, that they needed to assess the environment. Sarah's voice cracked. "We're married. We're a family." Margaret cut in. "Not according to your documents. And frankly, even if you were, I have serious concerns about your fitness as parents." My patience was running on fumes. What concerns Margaret started reading off her sheet: my military absences, Sarah's supposed lack of visible employment, our financial instability. I said I was deployed serving the country. Sarah was on maternity leave from teaching. "Deployment means abandoning your family," Margaret fired back. "This child needs stability, not a father who disappears and a mother who can't support herself." Harold started toward Grace's bassinet, and that's when I stepped between them. "You're not touching my daughter." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Martinez, you're interfering with a legal child welfare investigation. Based on what I asked. Noise complaints. False reports." She started stacking up complaints. Crying baby property damage from baby equipment. Alleged unsecured infant. That's when it hit me. Margaret had been laying the groundwork for weeks. "You filed false reports to get our baby taken away," I accused. She called them legitimate concerns, citing community standards. I said, "We are a stable traditional family." She shot back. "Not by our standards. Different last names. Frequent absences. Instability." Harold tried again. "I need to examine the infant now." Sarah clung to Grace, struggling to her feet, begging him not to take her. Harold coolly wrote that down as emotional instability. And then something in me just snapped. I let Margaret know, real quiet, real direct. She had 30 seconds to get out of my house before I threw her out. Margaret just grinned, threatening violence in front of CPS, another mark against you. I'm not threatening, I said I'm promising. Harold finally looked rattled, muttered something about legal investigation. Margaret doubled down, tossing more evidence, baby supplies everywhere, no proper nursery. She said, "This child deserves better." Sarah started sobbing. "You broke into our house at 6 a.m. and threatened to take our baby. How am I supposed to react? A competent mother would have documentation ready and wouldn't live in an unmarried situation." Margaret spat. Then from the hallway, Patricia Webb, one of the board members, finally spoke up, nervous. "Margaret, this seems extreme. Maybe we should reconsider." Margaret cut her off cold. "We discussed this at the emergency meeting. This household violates multiple standards." Robert Chin, the other board member, mumbled, "They seem like a nice family. The baby isn't bothering anyone." Margaret whirled on him. "Nice families don't have unmarried cohabitation fathers who abandon for the military or mothers who can't support themselves." Fed up, I pulled out my wallet, showed our marriage certificate, my military ID, Sarah's teaching license. Margaret barely glanced. "Anyone can forge papers. This household still doesn't meet standards." "What standards?" Sarah cried. "Same last names. No military deployment." Margaret listed off her bizarre rules. "Fathers never away. Mothers always self-sufficient. Nursery must look like a magazine photo." "Those aren't standards," I said. "They're your prejudices. They protect property values," she insisted. At that exact moment, sirens wailed outside. Margaret looked confused. "Why are police here?" And from our doorway came Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor, phone in hand. "I called 911, she said. I saw strangers forcing their way in. Margaret barked, "This is HOA business." Mrs. Patterson fired back, "HOA business doesn't include stealing babies. I've lived here 40 years and never seen anything this disgusting." 3 police cars pulled up. Officers Johnson and Martinez, no relation, came in. We got reports of a break-in and threats against a family with a newborn. Margaret tried to take charge. "We're conducting a legitimate child welfare investigation. Do you have a warrant?" Officer Martinez asked Harold. He shook his head. "Then you have no legal authority to be here," Johnson said. Margaret finally started to waver. I handed over my IDs, again explained everything. Officer Johnson checked them carefully. "Everything looks legit." Margaret flailed, repeating her claims about last names and military absences. "Ma'am, keeping your maiden name doesn't invalidate marriage, and military service isn't abandonment," Officer Martinez said, dead serious. Harold tried to justify his actions, citing unstable environment and complaints. "From who?" the officer asked. "From me," Margaret said, almost proud. Turns out she'd been stalking us for weeks. Photos, notes, even sound recordings. Officer Johnson stared at her like she was from another planet. "Ma'am, you've been stalking this family." "Protecting community interests," Margaret insisted, "maintaining standards." The other officers questioned Patricia and Robert. Turns out Margaret had called an emergency board meeting just to get rid of us. "These people don't belong in a family neighborhood," she spat, voice rising. "Different last names, military absences, unstable jobs." Officer Johnson had heard enough. "You're under arrest for filing false reports, breaking and entering, and harassment," he said, snapping handcuffs on Margaret as she shrieked, "That baby doesn't belong in this community. You're not the right kind of family." Officer Martinez turned to her, voice flat. "And what kind of family is the right kind?" Margaret actually answered, "Traditional. Married. Same last names. Fathers present. Mothers knowing their place." Harold tried to distance himself, but he was arrested, too, attempting to remove a child on bogus evidence, all from illegal surveillance Margaret had cooked up. They dragged Margaret out screaming. Sarah broke down on the couch, Mrs. Patterson hugging her, saying, "Honey, that woman's been a menace for years. You're not the first." Turns out Margaret had chased off other families too, the Johnsons for being too loud and interracial, the Garcias for their Spanish, The Williamses' single mom with a teenage son. The Chins for being immigrants. Always something, always. The cops took our statement documenting everything. The prosecutor said it was a slam dunk. Investigation uncovered a whole pattern. Margaret had filed false CPS reports on anyone she didn't like. Race, language, military, anything that didn't fit her mold. Her documentation was just obsessive stalking. Court was brutal. Margaret defended herself but made it worse. She actually said mixed-race families confuse children. Military parents abandoned their kids. Immigrants threatened American values. The courtroom gasped. The judge told her she was the worst kind of threat, using child protection to terrorize families. She got 28 years, minimum 15 before parole for kidnapping, perjury, stalking, and civil rights violations. The best part, the community changed. The HOA was dissolved, rebuilt with protections for every kind of family. Grace is 3, now thriving. Sarah's head of her department. I left the Navy, work security, now helping other families fight back. The Johnsons' kids are honor students. The Garcias started a business. The Williams boy got a scholarship. The Chins blended right in, culture and all. And everyone learned love makes a family, not some HOA handbook. Margaret rots in prison, convinced she was protecting children, but it's the kids she tried to destroy who are thriving, stronger, prouder, and free. Justice was served not because I was a Navy SEAL, but because a community stood up for what was right, families loving their kids however they look. That's what matters. And if you think you know what makes a real family, maybe it's time you ask yourself what kind of world you want your own kids to grow up in. What do you think? Was justice really served, or does something still need to change about how communities police their own? Let me know in the comments below, and hey, share your own story. Who knows, maybe it'll help someone else stand up for what's right.
Xin chào các bạn, mình là Trinh, mình phụ trách viết content. Trên đây là những công việc của mình, là mình lên mạng xã hội.
It is cold, yeah. Next one? Alright. Thank you, man. Hey, if you guys have any trouble, let somebody know. Please.
After the tree to hold on to. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
the fence.